Hi, everybody. Welcome to Social Studies and Science. Today we are going to be starting a new unit where we're going to be talking about the Galapagos Islands. Galapagos Islands. And I gave it capital letters. It's the name of a place, right? And Galapagos is a Spanish word. And we're going to talk a little bit more about it in a minute. You can see it has a little line over the top right here. That lets us know which syllable to emphasize. So for instance, when we say Aiden's name, we say Aiden. We say the A stronger. We don't say Aiden. We don't emphasize the den, right? Well, in the Galapagos, we're going to emphasize the second syllable. We're going to say Galapagos. So they put a little accent, a little line over there to let you know which syllable to say a little stronger, to emphasize. So we're going to talk about the Galapagos Islands. Where in the world are the Galapagos Islands? Well, I happen to know personally where they are because I was lucky enough to take a trip there last summer. Okay. Now here's my little simple map. I don't have our classroom with our big maps, but here is North America that I've drawn. So we would be here in the middle with the United States, somewhere over here on the coast, Georgia, right? And then Savannah. So here's North America, our continent. I had to fly all the way down to South America, this continent. There's a country right over here called Ecuador. What's it called? Ecuador. Great job. And Ecuador, I gave it a capital E. It's the name of a country. Ecuador is right here on the equator. And we've talked about the equator before, okay? On our globe, the equator is all the way around the middle, so it's on the part that sticks out farther. It's going to be closer to the sun when it's facing the sun. So it can be very, very warm and hot down here. And just off of Ecuador, kind of like in the United States, off of the United States, we have our islands, another state, Hawaii. Same thing, Ecuador has a group of islands right over here called the Galapagos Islands. And when we have a group of islands that are together like that, we have a special word for that. It's a huge spicy word, okay? Archipelago. So we're going to emphasize the pe, okay? Archipelago. Can you say that? Archipelago. Great job. Here's the group right here, Galapagos Islands. Now, the Galapagos Islands are really special. People love to go visit the Galapagos Islands because they have different groups of animals and plants that you cannot find in other parts of the world or that are from there originally. So let's talk about our next two spicy words, vocabulary words. The first one is native. We've talked about that word before, okay? If, for instance, I am native to Illinois. That's where I was born and I grew up. That's where I'm from. But since then, I've moved. Now I'm in Savannah, Georgia. But I'm native to Illinois. Well, there's also a word called endemic. Endemic means that that animal or plant can only be found in that one spot. It hasn't moved to another spot. So it's not native to the Galapagos. There are plants and animals that you can only find if you go to the Galapagos Islands, which is pretty amazing in our great big wide world that you can only find certain things in that place. Okay, so that word is endemic. Okay. So we are going to be learning as we start this journey to the Galapagos Islands over the next couple of weeks. We are going to be finding a lot of animals that are either native to the Galapagos Islands or even endemic. Okay. So let me talk to you a little bit about how I got down there, okay, and about our first animal we're going to learn about. So when I went down, I had to fly down to Ecuador to their capital city, our capital city, Washington, D.C., okay? That's where our government, our president, everybody is up there. Ecuador has a capital city too. It's called Quito, and I'll put that up here. Q-U-I-T-O, Quito, okay? And I had to fly down there, and then I had to get onto a little sailboat, and it sailed over to the islands over here. Okay? Now the Galapagos Islands, so when I flew down to Ecuador, the people in Ecuador, they speak Spanish as their main language because we've talked about different explorers who were coming over from Europe to North and South America. Well, explorers from Spain came down to South America and Portugal, but a lot of the countries down here were settled and taken over by people from Spain. And so the people there were then taught and sometimes forced to learn Spanish. So it became the main language down in a lot of South American countries, including Ecuador. And because Spanish is the main language, the Galapagos Islands, that's got a Spanish name. And Galapagos actually means tortoise. And I don't know, are you familiar with the word tortoise, Chloe, Marta? Tortoise is like a large, it's similar to turtle, okay? Right here. We'll talk a little bit more about what makes this tortoise special, okay, in just a few minutes. So that actually means tortoise because when the people who were going and exploring these islands, they found there some really huge, giant tortoises. And so they named it the Galapagos Islands. And that's going to be our first animal that we are going to be learning about this week, the Galapagos tortoise. Okay. And let me show you a picture. So first of all, this is a really cool book. If you're able to find this book online, okay, expedition, big trip to the Galapagos Islands. And this was actually written by a little boy named Grayson, who was 8 years old at the time that he wrote this book. And he took a trip on a boat, like I did, around the Galapagos Islands, and he kept a journal, like Miss Lane is doing right now on her trip. He kept a journal and wrote down and took pictures of all the things that he saw on his trip, and he made this cool book. Okay? And one of the things that he saw was the Galapagos giant tortoise. Look at that face. Look at that face. Okay. Let me read you a little bit about what it says. It says, we visited the Charles Darwin Research Station at the Galapagos National Park Service on the island of Santa Cruz. And I'm going to have another video that shows you a map of all the islands, and I'll have some links on our page here that you can look to see maps of where the islands are and learn a little bit more information about the islands. So it says he was on Santa Cruz, one of the larger islands. I learned about how baby tortoises grow and how researchers collect the tortoise eggs from different islands and bring them back to their research center, and they put them in incubators where it's warm, so it'll feel like they're with their mom's body, staying warm, and it gives them a chance to grow safely where they won't get harmed by anything, and we can protect them. Now, why would we need to take the eggs and protect them? Well, it turns out that the giant tortoise is endangered. Okay? Over the years, people who were going to the islands a long time ago were finding the animals, and the tortoise naturally, on its own, doesn't have any predators, so it shouldn't have a problem surviving. But unfortunately, we as people can be a problem and a danger to animals. And people were killing these tortoises, a lot of them, to eat the meat, to keep the shells. They thought the shells were interesting and they could make things out of the shells. And so over time, we killed so many of them that they didn't have time to make enough babies to keep going. So actually, there used to be 15 different groups or species of the giant tortoise on the islands, and we've lost 5 of those species no longer exist. In fact, one of those species that we lost for a long time only had one tortoise left that we had found, and they called him Lonesome George. And if you want to research it, you can find out more about Lonesome George. Okay? But these tortoises are amazing because they actually can get to be larger than a bathtub. They can be huge. And I'll show you a picture of me with one of them in just a minute. They can be really, really big, gigantic, tortoises. That's why they're called the giant tortoise. And they're very slow moving, right? But they can live to be over 100 years old. And Lonesome George, little Lonesome George, he lived to be over 100 years old. But that's why scientists now and people who are trying to protect the tortoises will take some of the eggs and protect them and help them get stronger so that their shell will start to develop and get harder so that they can survive. Then they'll take the little babies when they're strong enough and put them back on the island where they found them so that they can grow and survive and hopefully have more babies. Okay? And he says, when they're old enough to fend for themselves, fend means protect, they can be released into the wild again. He says, when I saw the tortoises for the first time, I couldn't believe how big they were. I wondered how they could get so big from being so small as babies. Since I am now 8, I figure that they have been on the earth at least 98 years longer than I have because they can become more than 100 years old. Okay? So that was his experience with the tortoise. Let me show you my experience with the giant tortoises. So again, I also went to the big island of Santa Cruz. And let me explain, the islands here, okay, only 3% of the land. So if you took all of the islands and the land and cut it up into 100 pieces, only 3 of those pieces have people living on them, where there are some buildings or a little town. Only 3 of the pieces, 3%. 97% of all the land and several of the islands, the whole islands, have nobody living there, no buildings. And that is because Ecuador, the country, the people have decided to make it a national park and protect it so that we don't lose any more species of animals or plants. So now when you go, you have to go and you have to go with a natural guide who knows all about the island and who makes sure that you're only going in places where you don't touch the animals, you're just observing. And they're really working hard to protect those islands because they are a world treasure and we don't want to do anything to hurt it. Okay, so when I went, I also went to Santa Cruz. And this is a picture of me with a giant tortoise. Can you see how big that tortoise is compared to me? It's huge. It's huge. Now, I had to be back behind it pretty far away from it so it wouldn't be scared. And we weren't allowed to touch them. We didn't want to bother them. We just wanted to observe. So you can see his head is still coming out of the shell. He's not scared. And we were very careful. Here's a picture of my mom with a giant tortoise. Look at that. So cool. So cool. And I'm also going to post a little video of one of the tortoises so you can see how they move. And I'm going to post a link where you can learn more about the giant tortoise and all the cool parts of the scales on their skin, the different types of shells that they have. Okay. Some of them have a saddleback shell that sticks up so that they can put their neck really, really high and they like to eat cacti, pieces of cactus and flowers of cactus that are way up high. So some of them have really tall shells with a little big tall bump so they can reach up high. Some of them have just a dome, a lower one, and they get things that are lower on the ground. So you can learn a lot more about the giant tortoise. They're very cool. Okay, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.